Hello and welcome to a very special episode of Working Through the Backlog. Since this is a new series, this is my video blog where I talk about the games I beat as I work through my entire collection. These won't necessarily be formal reviews, but I will talk about the gameplay experience I had, overall presentation, which is graphics, sound, production values, attention to detail, etc., how entertaining it was, a plot synopsis and story discussion, the length, pacing, and difficulty curve, and finally what I would change to make it a better experience. Then at the end, do the really arbitrary thing, and give scores in the form of a report card. Today we're talking about Metal Gear Solid 5, Ground Zeroes. I avoided a lot of the initial hate and backlash for this game because I didn't buy it at launch. I had no intention of buying it, honestly, but I kind of just ended up with it from an eBay lot. In terms of what I used for this playthrough, I didn't deviate from the starting loadout. I really saw no reason to. So I just used the tranquilizer pistol for most of the game, and then if I ever got into like a small firefight, I'd switch to my combat rifle. This is probably going to sound really stupid, but I really appreciate that bullets actually go where you aim them. A lot of shooters like Uncharted or any Source Engine Valve game have this insane bullet deviation that drives me up the wall. So it's actually really refreshing that if I put the crosshair on a guy, that's exactly where the bullet is going. It also helps that your average enemy isn't a huge bullet sponge. 2 to 4 body shots is enough to take down pretty much every enemy. You know, a headshot, in conjunction with the lack of bullet deviation and aiming being really on point, means that I don't have to unload half a magazine to kill enemies. Stealth is a bit of a mixed bag. Enemies are pretty unaware for the most part. I can chalk a lot of that up to being an intentional design decision. As you know, it's nighttime, in the rain, and a lot of them are wearing ponchos with hoods that would obstruct your peripheral vision. I actually found that lying down and crawling were pretty useless. It seemed like for the most part being crouched was more than enough to avoid detection. Hell, I was sitting in the middle of a spotlight with a guard looking directly at me, pointing his flashlight at me, and I still didn't get noticed. So the AI can be a bit inconsistent at times, but the enemy also never reaches an omniscient presence, where you get spotted and everyone on the base just turns their guns at you and starts opening fire, like some games we know. Uncharted. MGS5 introduces a lot of what I would consider to be quote-unquote quality of life changes, mainly regenerating health and reflex mode. Right before I played Ground Zeroes, my brother and I were replaying Metal Gear Solid, and we ran into a scenario where we were out of rations, and we had to fight Rex. So I definitely think regenerating health was a step in the right direction, especially when you compare it to the last game in the series, Peace Walker, where you just gave yourself constant supply drops, so health wasn't really an issue. It's still fairly easy to die even with regenerating health, especially with enemy tanks and getting into a firefight with a lot of enemies. So the second quality of life change is definitely reflex mode. Reflex mode triggers when you're spotted by an enemy, and it gives you an opportunity to take them out in slow motion to avoid an alert phase. I think it is an excellent addition. A lot of the time in previous Metal Gears I'd be really close to an event trigger and get spotted, forcing me to go hide and wait. Reflex mode gives you an opportunity to avoid that if you can get a shot off, but it's not a sure thing. There's also the option to turn it off if you're a purist, and that gives you some bonus points at the end of the mission. But my stance on points is like whose line is it anyway? Everything's made up and the points don't matter. Every single individual component in Ground Zeroes works really well. And I think more importantly is that it all works really well together. Overall, I think the entire Metal Gear Solid 5 package is probably the best third-person shooter I've played. You know, at least on a mechanical level. I played Ground Zeroes on PS3 and I actually was quite impressed. The Fox engine scales down really well to previous generation hardware. I think it goes without saying it would be a superior visual experience on PC, PS4, or Xbox One, but I definitely think it stands out as one of the best looking PS3 games. The cutscenes are actually fairly minimal, which does feel a bit odd for a Metal Gear Solid game. The voice acting and motion capture are really well done, even if some of the dialogue is just flat out silly and the plot points are kinda dumb, but you'd kind of expect that from Metal Gear. There are some really nice touches, like when you're listening to an audio tape, sounds like gunshots or the ambient rain get muffled because you have your earbuds in.
Bus! On your feet. Okay.
In terms of like interfaces, I actually found the interface for the iDroid to be a bit lacking. It can be a bit complicated to navigate, especially when you're first trying to figure it out. It took me a while to figure out how to call down the helicopter the first time I played, which you have to end up doing twice. I know this gets really streamlined in the Phantom Pain, so it really just feels like a minor gripe. I usually play with subtitles if I can, and they have a good clear font which makes them easily readable. Overall, there's just a really nice level of polish and attention to detail to pretty much every aspect of the game. Ground Zeroes is pretty easy, but I don't think that's a big deal because I view Ground Zeroes as kind of a component of the whole Metal Gear Solid 5 package, and Ground Zeroes really feels like an introductory mission in a lot of ways. That being said, I did die a handful of times, and obviously it was when I was spotted. It's pretty clear that going in guns blazing is not the way you want to handle this mission. The stealth is quite forgiving, which is good for me because I'm not super patient and stealth games kinda aren't really my jam. I do make a bit of an exception for things like Metal Gear. There are a good number of checkpoints, so if you do die, you only lose minimal progress. It's more of a streamlining change, I feel, which goes along with a lot of the other changes like regenerating health and reflex mode that make the game easier. But I actually consider it to be like a net positive change because it makes the game have better flow and consistency. There are a few scenarios that you're simply not equipped to deal with. After you rescue Paz, you can get into a scenario where if you get spotted, an APC will show up and you just can't deal with it with your standard loadout. On replays, when you've unlocked the rocket launcher, it shouldn't be an issue, and you know, you probably can find a rocket launcher on base, but in that scenario you're probably just gonna end up running away or getting killed and having to restart at the checkpoint and trying again. Overall, it's pretty easy and forgiving. Reflex mode maybe gives you a little bit too much leeway in terms of the stealth, but like I said, I don't think it needed to be hard, as I really believe it to be an introductory mission to the Phantom Pain. To address the elephant in the room, Ground Zeroes is short, like really short. It's likely by the time the video is over, you could have beaten Ground Zeroes, at least if you're skipping all the cutscenes and the 10 minutes of end credits. In terms of being a complete, conclusive mission, with the cutscenes included, it goes for about 45 minutes. I started recording from PS3 dashboard to main menu post-completion, and my total record time was 55 minutes, 11 of which was end credits. It's paced really well, and you're frequently doing something, whether it's moving to another objective, watching a cutscene, or scoping out an area. It never feels like a slog, which is good, because if I had any kind of pacing issues in a 45-minute mission, it would be a huge problem. I did end up waiting about a minute when I got Chico to the rendezvous point, but I can't remember if that's scripted or not. I did call the helicopter before I reached the RV with Paz, so you can definitely avoid at least one of those waiting periods with some foresight. The problem with the short length largely comes into value for money and lasting appeal. The first time I played the mission, it took me 50 minutes, and the second was around 35. You get some bonus objectives like blowing up some anti-aircraft guns or taking out a handful of specific soldiers on the base, but you know, it's all fluff. It's just a way to pad out the length of the game without actually having any meaningful content. So I mean, it's fine for what it is. I find it lacking. I think a lot of my criticisms were lessened because I knew what I was getting into. I knew it was going to be short, and you know, I didn't really pay anything for it. I also didn't have this large waiting period before Ground Zeroes and the Phantom Pain, because after I beat Ground Zeroes, I just jumped right into the Phantom Pain. The story is very much there just as a skeleton for the introduction to the Phantom Pain. An inspection team is scheduled to come to Mother Base to ensure that MSF has no nuclear capabilities. While the inspection is arriving, you're tasked with rescuing Chico, who is a main character in Peace Walker, from a facility in Cuba. Then after you rescue Chico by choking him out,
Chico, calm down. Calm down. Don't fight it.
you get him to the RV and drop him off on the helicopter. Then you find out that Paz, another character from Peace Walker, is also in the facility, and you have to find and extract her in the same way. Once you've extracted Chico and Paz and you're heading back to Mother Base, you find that Paz was implanted with a bomb and your medic takes it out.
Boss.
Breathing stable.
Once you arrive back in Mother Base, you find that
It was nothing but a smoke screen. I heard explosions, then... They played us like a damn fiddle!
actually just a huge ruse to destroy MSF. Everyone manages to escape, but it turns out that Paz had a second bomb inside her and it explodes, knocking Big Boss into a coma and leading directly into the start of the Phantom Pain. I think it works for the most part. It's definitely good enough for its intended purpose, but it's lacking as a standalone game. It feels like a component of the Phantom Pain rather than its own isolated and complete narrative. So I honestly think the "there is a second bomb" thing was beyond dumb, even by Metal Gear standards. They should have just only had there only be one bomb, have the medic miss finding it, and then after they've evacuated Mother Base, play it out exactly the same. Have Paz reveal there's a bomb, and then jump out of the helicopter and have it explode. It basically made the first scene of removing the bomb totally redundant. If you're gonna have Paz blow up as the catalyst to the Phantom Pain, then, you know, make it the catalyst. Don't do some stupid bait and switch where they get it out and quote-unquote save her, then go, whoops, sorry, there's 2 bombs the whole time. You know, it's worthless in terms of the overall story. Actually, the whole bomb inside of the gut thing is pretty ridiculous upon further scrutiny. It means that Skullface basically anticipated Big Boss rescuing Chico, then finding out that Paz is also there, rescuing her as well, getting them safely to the helicopter, and then blowing them up. It's all kind of silly and full of holes, but you know, like whatever. Metal Gear's always been kind of silly and full of holes, so it's not a huge deal. No, I liked it a lot. I had a lot of fun. Ground Zeroes did a great job of keeping me engaged for the hour it took for me to finish. You know, if it didn't, that would be a big problem. I mean, the gameplay is great. You know, it feels great to sneak around. You know, you get a headshot in reflex mode and you feel amazing. You know, you feel like you really are like a legendary soldier sneaking around. If you do get into a firefight, you know, it's intense enough to make you feel like a real threat, and it does kind of trigger like a fight or flight response, and both of them are really viable ways to proceed. You know, CQC is insanely satisfying to pull off. It has a real sense of impact when you slam the guy into the ground. And you know, it's really easy to pull off. You know, one of the things I didn't like about Metal Gear Solid 3 is that it was kind of difficult to do the CQC maneuvers. You know, the cutscenes are good, everything's entertaining, it all looks good. There's still the element of campiness present, you know, with Miller yelling about how they were played like a fiddle, and how the inspection was nothing but a smokescreen. The one thing I will be critical of is that it feels a bit weird not having David Hayter be the voice of Snake. Don't get me wrong, Kiefer Sutherland does a good job, but it feels wrong somehow. In terms of what I think is better, it's a bit hard to articulate exactly what it is besides just saying, you know, longer, more content, all that stuff. Overall, I think Ground Zeroes is really good, but I would probably change a few things. So as it stands right now, it's kind of like a one and done kind of thing. You play it once, you get your bridge between Peace Walker and the Phantom Pain, then you just throw it on the shelf forever. Since it's so short, even with the optional objectives for replayability, there's no reason to replay it now that the Phantom Pain is out, because the Phantom Pain is just a much bigger experience. Since it's a Metal Gear game, I am expecting cutscenes, and while I do appreciate that Ground Zeroes has a strong emphasis on gameplay, kind of like backpedaling from Metal Gear Solid 4's insane number of cutscenes, I would have liked actually a little more insight and story into what's going on. You know, it would have been great to go through the base and maybe see Skullface or one of Skullface's lieutenants and, you know, do a little bit of eavesdropping, maybe, I don't know, pick some pockets or something to get the intel instead of just having it given to you. I think it would have made it a little more interesting and a little more engaging, probably give you a little bit more replayability. I think Ground Zeroes needed like a boss encounter, some kind of like a finale moment. I know you don't fight her at the end, but you fight Olga in MGS2's The Tanker mission. It adds a little extra to the tanker that maybe makes it feel a bit more replayable or interesting. Just because you have that unique boss encounter that's only in the tanker. Like I said, it's hard to articulate exactly what I would change with Ground Zeroes besides, you know, more and longer. Even with it only being a single mission on a single level, it's still a really enjoyable game. And in some ways, it is a little better than the Phantom Pain, but we'll get into that in the next video. So would I recommend Ground Zeroes? Yeah. I mean, it's good. I think it does a few things a little bit better than the Phantom Pain ends up doing, but, you know, it's got a really short runtime, so it's kind of hard to justify buying it. If you can get Steam Family Share, or rent it, or borrow it from a friend, that's probably a great option, and then it's definitely worth playing. Otherwise, you know, I think it's safe to skip, and you just go straight into the Phantom Pain, and I think the Phantom Pain is definitely worth playing. Fulton Extraction and Open World ruined it.